Hi, sweet beans. Welcome back to Wild Geese. I'm your host, Anna. If you feel like you've spent more time and energy in your life focusing on being desirable instead of pinpointing and following your own personal desires, this episode is for you because I am you. I want to talk about our relationship to our desires, how to spot them, how to extract them from what other people might want from us or for us, and then how to enlist our community as co-conspirators to bring those desires to life. Because I think that being connected to our desires and then being honest about them can be something that reignites our relationship with other people. And I want to be clear that when I talk about desires, I'm not just talking about a list of goals and a list of things that can push us towards becoming like this perfect ideal of ourselves. I think we're about to come into the holiday season. We're about to go into the new year. You're about to start seeing a lot of messages that are like how to manifest your dream life in this new year. And all of that, while it is fun to think about, it also reinforces this idea that wherever you are right now is like not the right place to be. I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be because look at what just arrived at my door. I'm very happy to say that this week's episode is brought to you by Book of the Month. Book of the Month is a monthly subscription service with a team of experts that reads hundreds of books and then picks their favorites so that you can pick one new hardback fiction book to be sent to you at such a low price. I was drawn towards Book of the Month because of the work they're doing to champion emerging authors, and I just trust their taste to lead me to books that otherwise I may have never picked up myself. So this month I chose We Who Will Die by Stasia Stark. This is a story set in an ancient Roman world ruled by vampires where our main character Arvel makes a magically binding vow to kill the emperor. But first, she has to enter an arena and fight to be selected to become one of the Emperor's elite guard. I'm hungry for this. It's been so long since I've read romantasy. The description is kind of giving a Twilight Hunger Games crossover episode, which sounds like everything I want and more right now. And I chose the romantasy option because this is a genre that I really love reading, but I really hate picking the books to read because I feel like I have to go through a whole rabbit hole on book talk, and then half the time I still pick up something that's not quite as satisfying as I want it to be. So I'm trusting the taste of the Book of the Month team on this one. But what's cool is that each book is covered by the reader's guarantee. So if you purchase a book and you don't like it, they'll replace it in the next box for free. You can also skip a month without being charged. So if a month comes up and nothing catches your eye, no problem. And of course, the holidays are coming up, and if you're anything like me, you have not started gift shopping yet. Book of the Month makes a perfect last-minute gift with instant delivery options. I was actually so shocked by how quickly this came. You can choose from 3-month, 6-month, or 12-month plans and choose how it's delivered. You can do a physical gift card, a print-at-home card, or an email, so it's a super flexible gift. Click the link in the episode description where you can join Book of the Month and take advantage of their limited time offer where you can get your first book for $5 plus a free hat of your choosing with the code HOLLY. If you sign up, let me know what book you picked. It was so hard to choose this month. So many of them were drawing my eye, so I'm excited to hear what you think. A lot of what I'm going to be pulling from today is from the book A Woman's Guide to Power Unbound by Kasia Urbaniak, who I have talked about before. I have listened to this audiobook an embarrassing amount of times. It is just full of goodies that I am constantly in need of reminders of. Kasia is just such a cool woman. She has 2 decades of experience as a professional dominatrix, and then she spent 17 years in training to become a Taoist nun in China. When I think of what a life might look like following personal desires versus societal expectations, I think Kasia is definitely an embodied example of that. And in this book, she talks a lot about the power dynamics between men and women and what it actually means to follow your desires in a way that empowers the people around you. She says your true desires aren't goals, not the cravings you scroll past on Instagram or your parents' hard-won dream for you. This is not the life force inciting your animal body to hunt for its greatest pleasure and joy. The desires I'm talking about are the ones that light the fire burning deep within you. Because knowing what feeds you, what lights you up, and what you plug into that will always nourish and inspire you is the power of desire. When we move from fixing ourselves to creating our lives, we shrug off the good girl conditioning that tells us we're not enough. When we access the magic of every one of our greedy, lusty desires, we smash the good girl taboo of being ashamed for wanting too much. Knowing what we want is a prerequisite for moving powerfully through the world. True desires are a message from you to you about what will make you feel truly alive. And I felt like now was a good time to talk about this because I feel like I'm at a spot in my life where I have people in my life and experiences showing up in my life that are asking me to be honest about what I want and to speak what I want pretty frequently, whether it's an opportunity landing in my inbox or a loved one asking me to be honest about what I want to do on my birthday and not just go along with the plans that might make everybody else happy. I feel incredibly fortunate to be at a place in my life where people are looking at me and asking, what do you want? And I have felt myself completely constrict and freeze at almost every single opportunity to answer that question. So how can we actually be ready for this question when it arrives? And, or How can we train ourselves to speak about what we want when no one's necessarily asking? Because I have definitely been through stints in my life where it felt like I was not ever being asked what I wanted. And I've definitely done the thing where I've tried to take on the quote unquote cool girl persona, the girl that never asks for anything. And I actually remember in high school looking through this girl's Facebook page. She didn't go to my school and she was older than me. So she was one of the girls that I really looked up to. And she was in this relationship that I thought looked really good, mostly because the guy was hot, probably. But I remember seeing multiple comments from guys in her grade who were calling her a chill girl and saying I really like you, you're a chill girl. And I was like, oh, so chill is what I should be. Okay, I can be chill. No, I can't. I am definitely at my core not a chill girl, whatever that even means. But I think a lot of us have memories of being told that we're asking too much. And at a certain point, we just stop asking entirely because we think it's the more powerful position to be completely independent. And Kasia says, there's no such thing as a low maintenance woman. There's no such thing as a low maintenance person. Buying into this myth is leaving a lot of opportunity on the table. Power is a function of strong relationships where what you receive from people in your life is exactly what you need and want, and where what you give is valued by the receiver. And there is a stigma around wanting. Kasia calls it a culture-wide prohibition against female appetite. And she says, it's not attractive to admit you're hungry or you want sex. Wanting success might make you seem unfeminine. A desire for love makes us seem weak. The most radical thing a woman can do is want. And this reminded me of Little Weirds by Jenny Slate. I read this in college around the same time that I read Three Women by Lisa Taddeo. Both books explore women's desires in a way that was completely new to me as a senior in college. I feel all through college, I dabbled with manifestation and whatnot, but so much of what I was trying to do when I was manifesting was what we were talking about before, which is optimize my life and try to fix myself into this perfect state where I will somehow arrive at a place where I've evolved past desire, whether that was my desire for love or my desire for success, whatever it was. So to read Jenny Slate say, I am supposed to be touched. I can't wait to find the person who will come into the kitchen just to smell my neck and get behind me and hug me and breathe me in and make me turn around and make me kiss his face and put my hands in his hair, even with my soapy dishwater drips. I am a lovely woman who will come into my kitchen and be hungry for me. Reading that, I was oh, I'm allowed to want this? And look, one way to read that is to say, that sounds like a desire about being desired. But I feel there's a difference between saying, I am already a desirable person, and here's exactly how I wish to be desired, versus what do I need to do in order to become a desirable person that's worthy of love? Jenny's getting so specific on the actions that would be taken that would satisfy her desire to feel loved, to be touched. But I feel a lot of the times what we default to when we're asked what we want, we actually answer with how we want to change in order to feel worthy of our desires and not the desire itself. But locating our desires is something we can practice, and Kasia actually gives some really great prompts to help with this process. And one thing about desires is that we don't choose them. You can't will yourself to desire something that you just fundamentally don't desire. You can't will yourself to stop desiring something either. You can pretend to, you can push it down, you can throw a mask on top of it, but it's still there. So how can we pinpoint exactly what we desire, divorced from society's expectations, our insecurities, our fears, whatever? There's a couple of fun ways to do this. Number one is making a list of your complaints. So if you find yourself complaining I wish my friends would reach out to me more. I wish I wasn't the only one that ever initiated a hangout. There's a desire there. You want your friends to make more of an effort to connect with you. Kasia says that when she first started working with women, she was wondering why the default was to complain instead of simply ask for what they want. Because women are taught that wanting things is taboo. That doesn't get rid of the want, it just makes the want harder to communicate. So she uses the example of wanting a bouquet of flowers from your lover. How this will often be communicated is a complaint instead of asking for flowers. So she says to make a list of complaints about anything and everything, and you will find desires that are masquerading as complaints. Another way is to do a jealousy map. This is something that I took from the Artist's Way. It's basically making a list of anyone that you're jealous of and then asking yourself why. And that can often uncover some desires that are beneath the surface. And it's interesting, when you feel a ping of jealousy, it's not always super clear why, and you'll have to kind of experiment with it a little bit. So for example, the other night I went to a poetry reading. A lovely Wild Geese listener gifted these tickets to me. Thank you so much. You know who you are. I love you. And it was with Hanif Abdurakib, Sarah Kay, Anish Mazgani, and Clint Smith. And I found myself feeling jealous of them because they've been doing this show 9 years in a row. And it's kind of hard for me to pinpoint exactly why the jealousy is there. Right now, I'm not sure if the jealousy is there because I'm jealous of the fact that they're doing spoken word, or I'm jealous of the little group of poets that they have formed for themselves, that they have this friendship that has held strong no matter how distant they are from each other, and that they can come together once a year and do this show together. It might be a little bit of a mix of both, but in order for me to figure that out, I would then have to go experiment in my own life with those desires to see if either of those things are the real root of the jealousy or if it's something else. So that might look like starting to write spoken word poetry and seeing how that feels, or it might look like reaching out to other writers that live in my city and seeing if they want to meet up and write together. We'll talk in a second about how to take a desire and turn it into an ask, but that's how jealousy might be able to point you in the direction of your desires. And then she says to make a book of desires. So this can be a journal that you carry around with you everywhere you go, or you can just make it in the notes app on your phone. That's what I've done. Anytime you want something, write it down. Let it be delusional. I was surprised when I sat down to make a new book of desires for this go round because like I've said, I've listened to this audiobook a couple of times, so I've started and forgotten about my book of desires a few times in my notes app. And I was surprised by how limited my imagination felt right now. Her whole thing is, she says, don't let reality pollute your log. If it starts to go that way, imagine that you're commanding a fictional support staff with infinite resources. We will eventually return to Earth, but for now, we need to take flight and let go of the concept of deserving. As we've said, you have no say in what you want. Be impractical, unreasonable. And I think doing this multiple times with months in between has been a real eye-opener because when I look back at old desires, I let myself dream of wild things that I never saw coming to fruition. And this time I looked at my book of desires and it was all things that I actually could ask someone for today if I wanted to. And the concept of deserving is a huge limiter on my imagination as I'm doing this exercise. I'm constantly fighting against the urge to only write down desires that I think make sense and are justified and kind. But if this part of the process is simply to honestly see what's there and to spot desires as they come, then my allegiance to logic and deserving and timing and resources cuts off the intimate connection that I could have with my desire if I just allowed myself to write anything I want, no matter how insane it sounds on paper. Cassia says, be as playful, as greedy, as selfish, as frivolous, as lawless, as vain, as neglectful and useless and lazy, as hypersexual and as straight up evil as you want to be. She talks about how desires start as these sort of vague, nebulous impulses that are very loosely sketched fantasies. They may or may not be very specific. They could be more of a feeling. But then she says that power actually comes from inviting people into this fantasy. So you'll take your list of complaints, see if there are any desires hiding in there. You'll take your book of desires, and then you can start brainstorming for the asking process. So the prompt that she gives is, I could ask blank for blank. You will not actually be beholden to asking these people for these things. So let yourself explore, let your imagination run wild, and do this quickly so that you're not overthinking it. Cassia says that when she does this exercise with people, there are these excuses that people come up with every time when they can't think of things to ask for based on these societal rules that we've set for ourselves about what is and isn't appropriate to ask for. So these are a couple. I can't ask for something I can pay for myself. I can't ask for something I could do myself but don't want to. I can't ask if I haven't earned it. I can't ask if it means I'll owe him later. I can't ask unless I'm desperate. I can't ask for something I want but don't really need. So those are just barriers that come up when people are trying to think of things that they could theoretically ask people, that they have been told, you will not be asking anyone for this, but what could you hypothetically ask someone for? But the reason she says this exercise is important is because it gives you an idea of the army that you could command. Yes, this exercise is still very in the clouds. A lot of these asks are not going to be things that you even actually want to ask for in real life. But Cassia calls this a tool of location that will help you cut through the fog of ambiguity. To me, it kind of feels like this process of translating from desire to ask, because desires often start as these vague feelings that are sort of floating around and just indicating to you that something wants to change. And that's natural, but then how do you bring that desire into the physical space, into your reality? You have to sharpen the feeling into a specific ask. One of the poets said something along the lines of, writing poetry is how I know what questions I'm asking. And that just reminded me of what I have been thinking about in line with this episode of okay, if I desire love, what am I actually asking for? If I desire rest, what am I actually asking for? If I desire power, what am I asking for? If I desire respect, what am I asking for? Because those things are going to look very different for every person. If you just ask someone for respect, they might deliver that to you in a way that makes sense to them and makes no sense to you. So how do we turn our desires into more of like an outstretched hand instead of a secret or something that you wish that they would just assume? How can I pull people into the desire and like build a bridge between us instead of putting up a wall because they weren't able to read my mind? Often when I feel hurt by someone else's actions, it's because there's like a desire somewhere that's being unmet. And I'll often get pretty quiet while I'm trying to do this translation process of like taking a feeling and turning it into something that I can actually ask from this person. And the ask is kind of like a wild guess of what you might need. Like you can think through like, okay, do I need a hug right now? Do I need this person to leave the room so that I can think? Do I need, like you don't know if it's actually going to satiate the desire until it's given. But I can, before throwing out the ask, feel in my body what it might feel like to receive that and then ask for it. And then once it's given, if you reach an agreement there, then you have more information. So to take this out of hypotheticals, because like I said, I usually get kind of quiet while I'm going through this process of turning a desire into an ask. That behavior often communicates to the person that I'm with that I want space, and the other person will usually withdraw. And that space that my own silence is probably communicating that I want is something that generally makes that process of translation harder for me because it puts like a weight of shame and urgency and whatever on top of it. So knowing that, having like a lot of evidence that that is how that feels, I've been able to translate that personal experience into like, okay, the desire is I want to still feel loved and cared for even while I'm trying to translate these hard feelings and getting quiet. I want to feel connected to this person while I'm going through all of this. So I've been able to go to the other person and ask, hey, when I seem far away, when I withdraw, can you just come give me a hug? And when I asked for that, that was just a hunch that I thought maybe that would help me. And then I got evidence the next time that I got quiet and I got a hug from the other person that it actually did help a lot. So I knew I asked for the right things. But if you ask for the wrong thing, that's just information. That doesn't mean that the desire is invalidated. That just means you go back to the drawing board and think of a different ask. And if you're in relationship with people that want to make you feel like shit for changing your ask and want to be like, well, you asked for this and that didn't satisfy you, so nothing's going to satisfy you. Like, I think that you'd be hard pressed to find a person that knew every single moment of their life exactly what would satisfy them. So don't buy into the idea that if you change your mind about what you want, you're some sort of hypocrite or something. Another example that Kasia uses is wanting respect in the workplace. If you got 4 people in the same room who had the complaint of, I don't feel like I'm respected at work, and you tried to turn that into an ask for each person, they would all translate that desire differently. So for one person, the desire might be satisfied by a promotion. For another person, it might be satisfied by going and speaking at a conference. For another, it might be a bigger office. The satisfaction of that desire would look different for each person. But I also think another thing, before we go out there and we start asking for people for help in making our desires reality, we have to become more comfortable with asking for help. And I think that that means redefining what asking for help means in the first place. And I think that Kasia does this really beautifully. She says, anytime we wish to create something bold and new in our lives, we need to enlist allies. An ask can be a confession of a desire and a first step towards seeing it satisfied. It can be an invitation to your inner world and a means of making space for someone else to join you there. It can be an expression of agency, a confirmation of alliances, a transformation of a dynamic. It can be the instigation for a game, a new conversation, a different way to play. Asking creates roles. Women are taught early that asking creates debt. Asking doesn't take away from the people you ask. Instead, it creates new and exciting roles for them. And I love this idea that like sharing our desires can be an invitation to change up a dynamic. It can be an empowering thing and a gift to the other person. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because if you're in a relationship with a person, any type of relationship, and you never ask anything of them, what does that do? It makes the other person feel like a loser. Of course, it would wear away at a person's confidence if they never understood how to properly support the other people in their lives. But Often, instead of asking for something, we'll complain about something, we'll hint at what we want, or we'll substitute reciprocity. So this is when you do something for someone because you want them to do it for you, and then when they don't mirror your actions, you get frustrated. Now, with that being said, I do think that there's something to be said for going first. So if you want love, embodying love. If you want people to ask you better questions, ask them better questions. If you want to surround yourself with more artists, then make more art, etc. But we can't be doing things simply because we want other people to do them for us and then getting frustrated at them for not reading our minds. I think it can often feel really lonely to yearn for something. I was talking to my friends the other night and we were talking about how having a crush feels like a humiliation ritual. And I think that that humiliation aspect is a big part of what scares people away from ever asking for their desires to be met in the first place. We're afraid of rejection. We're afraid of someone like laughing in our face, essentially. But Kasia also reframes no as just another way to play around, another invitation to play with the ask until it's something that two people can agree on. You don't want to coerce someone into saying yes to satisfying a desire that you have when it's not like a full yes for them as well. So part of the fun is like coming together and kind of figuring out where that sweet spot is that satisfies desires for both of you. Another thing Kasia talks about before you approach someone with an ask is the power of legitimacy, which is not necessarily about being convinced that you're going to get what you want from the other person. It's about knowing on a cellular level that you have a right to ask for it. Like, have you ever been in a situation where someone's asking for something and you can tell that they're kind of embarrassed or ashamed as they're asking for it? And then if you don't want to give it to them, it makes you feel weird and bad. So maybe you don't even feel safe enough to say no, and you say yes in the moment and then go back on it later. And it's just like this strange dynamic that comes up when we're not like 100% sure that we actually have a right to ask for what we're asking for. And Kasia tells the story of this woman who's like asking, how do you hold the line when someone is saying no to you? Like, how do you stay convicted in what you want? And Kasia asked the woman what she did for work, and the woman said that she was a nanny. And so she said, okay, so what would happen if I was a stranger and I came up to you and just said like, hey, I'm going to take this little boy on a walk, just the two of us. Is that okay? And then the woman, of course, was like, absolutely not. Like, and Kasia said there was nothing that anyone on earth could have said that would have convinced her to let some random stranger take this little boy out of her sight. Do you see how powerful that is? Now, imagine that she wasn't protecting the child in her care, but her dream of becoming a sculptor or her organization's vision for housing justice. Imagine feeling so completely sure of the correctness of your conviction that there's not an argument on earth that could persuade you to dump that dream. That is how rock solid I want you to feel about your desires. So like going back to what I was saying earlier about how you might actually ask for the wrong thing that doesn't really satisfy the underlying desire, and then you'll have to ask for something else. Or you'll get a no, like someone will reject your ask and you have to change the ask around. But shifting what you're asking for doesn't change the desire that you're protecting. She has a whole legitimacy exercise that she goes through that basically just helps you try to feel in your body what it would feel like to get what you want before you ask for it. And then you'll be more equipped to handle a no when it's given to you. And then the no opens up the opportunity to navigate conflict and friction to get to actually a better option. Kasia says, what we've seen over and over again is that two people creating options out of the crucible of resistance can do something better than simply getting to a yes. They'll come up with a third solution, one that wildly outperforms both of their solutions, and one that would have been previously unthinkable before the conflict arose, simply because nobody was looking there. And she talks about how when we hear no from someone, our like knee-jerk reaction is to go in on ourselves, to blame ourselves, to think, oh, I shouldn't have asked. But actually the best thing to do is to keep your attention outward on them and just start asking questions. These are not accusatory questions, but these are like in the spirit of trying to stay curious instead of freak out, you know? So asking things like, how did it make you feel when I asked you that? You're trying to understand the circumstances of the no without just being like, but why not? And then she has a whole process for how to navigate these conversations in order to get to that more exciting third solution. I will let you go and actually read her book because there's just like, it's a whole masterclass and I simply can't cover it all in a 30-minute episode, but I hope that I'm giving a bit of an overview here that's helpful. But there are so many messages out there that are telling us that the coolest, most powerful thing is to be wantless, and I reject them entirely. There are people out there who want to know what you want and who will look you in the eyes and ask. And if you haven't found them yet, then you have to work up the courage to be the one to ask first. A fun way to ask for something if you're really afraid of rejection is something that I saw in a Substack essay that I can't find now, and it's so frustrating that I can't find it because this was like months and months ago. If you know the Substack essay that I'm talking about, please let me know. I would love to credit this person, but they brought forward the question, what would it take? And I just love that because it kind of lifts the fear of someone just straight up saying no to you. And it also like opens up the other person's imagination. So if you went up to a customer support person and you said, hey, what would it take for me to get an upgrade on this flight? Then suddenly they're thinking imaginatively and they're maybe giving you an answer that's not actually accessible to you, but it's something to play with. And it's a little less nerve-wracking than just going up to them and saying, can I get an upgrade on this flight for free? You're just not exposing yourself to flat out rejection in the same way. So I think that that's kind of fun. But we can start to see desire as like a legitimate community builder versus this like very isolating, shameful humiliation ritual that we were talking about before. We can start to see it that way when we start to notice the way that asking for what we want opens up possibilities for the people around us to step into new roles with us. It reminds me of the idea of loving to the point of invention. There's a line from the Sarah role play called The Clean House that says, there was once a very great American surgeon named Halstead. He was married to a nurse. He loved her immeasurably. One day, Halstead noticed that his wife's hands were chapped and red when she came back from surgery, and so he invented rubber gloves for her. It is one of the great love stories in medicine. The difference between inspired medicine and uninspired medicine is love. When I met Anna, I knew. I loved her to the point of invention. And there are so many beautiful examples of this playing out. I saw a TikTok the other day of this man who opened up a cafe, I believe in the East Village. And he said when his son was diagnosed with autism, he decided to open up this bakery so that if his son ever reaches a place in his life where it's hard for him to find a place to fit in, he always knows that there's a place for him, that there's a place for him to work. And also everything they serve there is gluten-free because he saw somewhere that a gluten-free diet helps ADHD symptoms. And the examples of loving to the point of invention like this just go on and on. Like baking powder was invented by a man whose wife was allergic to eggs and yeast, and he wanted to make a yeast-free leavener. Wordle was invented by a software engineer whose wife loved word games, and they wanted to make one just for the two of them. Inventing these things and supporting the people that they love was generative for the inventors themselves. So I think that that's like the reframe around asking for help is that you actually never know how much bringing someone else into your authentic desires could end up also changing their lives for the better. And all of these exercises have definitely been about being as clear as you can within yourself about what you want and how you can ask for it from other people. But once you go out into the world and you're also dealing with other people's wills, it's not about holding so tightly to the desire that you're unable to see it be satisfied in any other way than what you have imagined. And I read this book, Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Marie Brown, a few months ago, and she says pleasure activism is the work we do to reclaim our whole, happy, and satisfiable selves from the impacts, delusions, and limitations of oppression and or supremacy. Ultimately, pleasure activism is us learning to make justice and liberation the most pleasurable experiences we can have on this planet. And then she asks, how would we organize and move our communities if we shifted to focus on what we long for and love, rather than what we're negatively reacting to? Is it possible for justice and pleasure to feel the same way in our collective body? Could we make justice and liberation the most pleasurable collective experiences we could have? So yeah, hearing that, I obviously highly recommend this book. It's a series of essays and conversations that talk about the direct relationship between our ability to feel and communicate pleasure and our social and political liberation. If you want to dive deeper into the more like erotic realm of desire, pleasure activism is a great place to do that. I think we'd be surprised how much the people in our lives would actually show up for us if we would make our desires known. And it might mean navigating some scary, vulnerable conversations. It might mean playing around with someone's no until you find a deeper yes that you can both agree on. But like sometimes it's even as simple as being in a group of people and saying, you know what, I want to do this. Like the other day I was at a party and my friend just randomly threw out the fact that she really wants to put together a clothing swap. That gave me the opportunity to be like, damn, I've been thinking about doing the same thing. And now you've got two people who are co-conspirators in making that happen. And even when it was just the two of us talking about doing it, I was still a little bit overwhelmed with the logistics. So then I went on my Instagram and I popped up a story just asking for everyone's help with, hey, does anyone know of a cheap or free venue that we could look into for a clothing swap? And I got multiple answers from people that want to help make this happen. And this is how we can find like little opportunities to escape the pockets of convenience that we've been trapped in, to believe that we can do everything ourselves with just the click of a button. But ultimately, it costs us more to go shopping. It costs the planet more if we go shopping than if a bunch of us come together to bring one person's desire to create a clothing swap to life. I feel like I just barely scratched the surface with how to pinpoint desires, how to actually ask for what you want, all of that good stuff. If you want to like really dive into that, I highly recommend Kasia Urbaniak's book and Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Marie Brown. Both are great reads. I hope you look into them, and I hope you ask for something you want today. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.